Assalamu alaikum. Hello everyone. This is Ahmed Saeed. We will continue on our session today, inshallah, with Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation SSRS reports. We created in our last session our first report by using the query. Today, inshallah, we will continue with our series with SSRS reports. We will create today the same report by using DB. As we checked in our last session, we have some report elements. Some of these elements is mandatory or the main elements which should be included in our report or in our project while creating a report. We talked in our last session if we need to create the same report but in this session with using data provider. So here we will use the same elements which we used in the main. We will use the report, we will use the output menu item and also the privilege. But here in data source, we will use data provider, and as we mentioned, we it's mandatory for us to create a table while creating a report using data provider as a data source. So we already have the tables which we added in our query, which is the sources for the report data. We will use the same, but here we will use it in the data provider. So let's review again our task or our requirement. We need to extract the sales for the customers and bear the invoices. So as we mentioned, we can easily find the data source if we navigate to inquiries and reports in account receivable, and we have here the invoice journal, and we just need some information. Let's change the company here. As we saw in our last session, we just need the customer account with customer name and with invoice and sales order and the date and the invoice amount. So to get the information or the data sources included here in this form, we just right click and form information. And here we have the query. We can easily copy the same query which exists here in the form information, and we can paste it in Notepad. Now we have here the tables which we should create our report using this table. We have the custom feature and we have the cost table and we have the deport table. So let's continue on our session and let's create our data provider class. And also before we creating the data provider class, we have to create the table which will be the data source for our report and data provider and which will be include all the required info. So here let's go to our project, and in our project we will create the data provider or the report using data provider. But the first element which should be created here in our scenario will be the temp table. But before creating the temp table, we have to check our fields. We have here 6 fields: customer account, customer name, sales ID, and invoice ID. All of these fields will be string, and we have the invoice date, and this field will be date, and this one will be the invoice amount will be a real field. So let's go to our project, and here in our project let's create the table. In most scenarios, the table which we will create will be a temp table. So here let's say it will be sales invoice train temp and add it. Now in the properties for this table, we have some properties need to be changed. The first property here for allow pro version change tracking will make it no. And here, as we didn't need to store the data in the database, we just need to fill the table while generating the report. So we will go to here in the properties. We have here the table type. We'll make it temp table. So here it will just fill the data while generating the report, and after this it will clear the data from the table. So let's continue and add our required fields. So here we created all the required fields on the table. Let's review the fields. We have here the cost account, and in next data we inherit from the cast account accidental type, and for the name we added it and get it from the name, and for the sales ID also, and the invoice date it's a string. Invoice date it will just be a date, and also for invoice amount. So after we just created our table, let's continue with creating the DB. So in our project here, let's create the DB clause. So here in the project, let's add the clause, and we'll make it sales invoice stream DB. So this class will act as a data source for the report. So we have to extend from a standard class here called SSRS report data provider. We have here some classes. The first one we have here data provider base. The data provider base class here it will just make our class to act as a data provider class, and we have here pre-process. In pre-process, it will just pre-process the data and collect the data and then add it in the design. So this class, if we extend the format, it will make our report faster, and it will give us more time in the heavy processes or heavy reports. It will be very useful to use it. So in our case here, we will use SRS report data provider pre-process temp as we use the temp table. So here it will make our table, our report faster, and it will just the benefit of this class. It will just collect all the required information from the tables. It will fill our table data source, and then it will generate the design. So it will be fast. Now we have a structure for our class. To use this class, we have two main methods which should be used in our DB here. We have the first method which will be responsible for the dataset, which will in this method we will define our table or our temp table which we created as a dataset, and the other one is the process method which will be responsible for process the report by generating or inserting the records in the temp table. So here let's take an object from our temp table which we created, which called sales invoice train temp, and we will make it temp. And let's define our first method or our first data source method. So here we have to add the prefix SRS report dataset attribute. Okay, and inside it we will define the name of the dataset which will appear in our report while selecting the data source from the report. So here we will make it with the same name, and here we will start with define our method. So it will be public, and the type of this method will be the same type of the table. So it will be sales invoice train temp, and we will name it as get data. It will not take any parameter. So here we will select asterisk from our temp table which we defined on the top. And as this method should return a value, we will return the same record which we selected. So here is our method, our data source method, which is responsible to define here in our report a first or our data set method. Some of the reports we have to define more than one table. For example, if we need to generate or design an invoice layout, we have here two data sources or two tables. We have one for the header and another one for the lines. So here in our scenario in the invoice, if we need to generate an invoice layout, we have to define two data sources, one for the header and another one for the lines. So easily we can define another data source here for the header and the lines. So in the DB or the data provider, we can define more than one data source according to our scenario and according to our requirement. So the second method which we have to use here, if we just go to the design, as we extend from a standard uh, class which is RS report data provider pre-process system, we can easily, if we right click here and we have here override, and we have our second method here which called process report, we will override this method. We will remove the super from here. So this method is the main method which is responsible, and the first method will be called while generating the report, which responsible for generating or inserting the records inside our temp table. So here let's take an object from all the tables which we saw before in our query. Here we have to take an object from the custom voucher and from cast table and also from the third party. So here let's take an object from this table. So here we have the cast table. We have also cast invoice jur, and we have the their party table. Now we defined all the or take an object from all the table which will be required in our table. So let's try to type our query. So here we need to loop in cast voucher, join the cast table and the party and select all the records according to our need here to get all the invoices. So here we will loop while select. To loop we just need to make it while select. Here to make our report faster, we have two scenarios. The first one, if we need to make it faster, we can use insert record set, as we didn't need to make any calculations, and also we can use while select. So in our report here we will type both of these statements and check our report performance. So here we will select, and here also we will just select the needed records. We didn't need from the customer all the information in the cast table. We just need some specific fields, so we'll select these fields. So from the cast table we will select account num from cast table. Okay, so here we join, we'll make it join. Okay, from we will take from the custom voucher, we will take invoice id, sales id, and we will take sales id, invoice date, invoice amount from custom voucher, where we will add our join here, join condition. So cast table dot account num equal invoice jur dot invoice account, join name from their party table, where cast account dot party equal party table dot rec id. We can easily check this relation if we go to cast table and check the relation between in the standard table. We can check the relation between cast table and third party. To do this, we can easily go to this table, and here in the relations we have here, we will find the party table. We have here the third party table, and we can easily find the relation and use the same relation. Now as it's just while select, we didn't need to add the semicolon, so we will fill our fields here. First of all, we will clear the temp table to make sure that there is no records will be in the table. And let's here start to assign our values. Here after we cleared the temp table, we started to assign all values. So here in all fields existing on the temp table, we started, for example, for the cast account, we got the cast account from cast table, and here also for the cast name, we got it from the party, and for the other information like invoice ID, sales ID, invoice date, and invoice amount, we got this information from cast invoice drawer. So here we will just, after we assigned all the values, we can easily insert in the temp table dot insert to insert all this required information. So in this kind of reports which take or will select all the required information from the system, I have here another best practice to make the report more faster. The problem here, we will try or we will start in our case here, we will start to loop or select the records existing in our tables record by record. And after this, we will start to open the connection with the database and insert it in the database record by record. But we have another functions or another code which will make our report faster. So here we have something called insert record set. So let's try together to type the insert record set and check what is the benefit of insert record set in our table. So here we type our insert record set. To type it, we will just type insert record set. We will select our table which we will insert the values in this table. And here we will start with define all the fields which we will insert it. And then here's the most important thing here is to select the values, just the values from the table and with the same sorting which we added here. So here the first value will be the cast account. So here select the account name from the cast table and let's join the fields which required from the cast invoice drawer and with the same sort we have here the invoice ID. So the first value from the cast invoice drawer will be the invoice ID, sales ID, invoice date, and invoice amount. And the last thing here, we will select the name from the third party table. So here's the benefit or the most benefit of insert record set. It will select all the required fields and required information from the tables, and then it will insert the data as a bulk on the temp table. So in our case here, it will be very useful to use insert record set. It will make our report faster because we didn't have any any complex calculations or any calculations in our report here. It's better to use insert record set. So we have two cases here or two codes here. We can use any code we need, but here in our case, it's very important to use insert record set because it's very fast, more than looping on the tables and get all the information record by record. So here we will use insert record set. We will comment our code here. Now we finished the data provider. We completed all the information in the data provider. We have here two main methods should be included or mandatory while generating the data provider class. We have here the data set method and we have here the process method. The data set method which is responsible to define the data sets or the tables inside our report here on our data provider here. And we have the process method. It's the first method will be called here in our report in our data provider, which is responsible for fill the data. So after we finish the DB, we will just build our project to make sure that there is no any error or any something wrong in our DB here. And after this, after we build the project, let's create our first report or our report here using the data provider. We will make it sales invoice DB report and we will click add. So here we will add a new data set and make it sales invoice dataset. And here we will change it from the data source type to be, instead of query, to be data provider. And here we will select our DB which we created. So we will select sales invoice train DB and we'll hit next. So here, as we can see here, we find just one data source which called sales invoice train temp. This is the value. Let's select, and we have here all the fields. Let's select the temp table, and this is the name which we added here on the DB on the top here. This is the name which will appear with us in the data source. So now we added our fields here, or our data set here, as a DB, and we added the temp table which exists in this DB. We can easily, as we did to create auto design, and here let's check in our auto design here the fields, the sort of the fields here. We have the cast account, cast name, and let's add the sales ID, and then the sales or invoice ID and the invoice date. Now we sorted all the informations, and here in the design, let's select here from the style template. As I mentioned before, we can select or try all of this and find the best one and use it. And here also in the layout template, let's change it to be, for example, here report layout, and here let's go to the menu item which we created. We will just change the report from here in the object. We will change it to get the report which we just created. This one sales invoice DB report, and this report also have the auto design which exists here. Now we finished our report. Initially, we added auto design. We changed it here in the sales invoice. We changed it in the menu item. Instead of creating a new one, we just changed the object and added the new report and the auto design. Let's build. We have to build because we make changes in the output. Let's build, and then let's deploy our new report and check the result in the system. So now, after we build and deploy our new report, let's go to account receivable, and under inquiries and report, and under invoices, we add our report here, sales invoices. So this is the new report. It will extract it here, and as we can notice, there is no record to include because we didn't use the query, and also in the DB here, if we didn't use the query, unfortunately, we can't make dynamics filter is true to filter with all the data exist in the query. But later on, inshallah, we will discover together how we can solve this kind of issues and how we can use query with DB. But here this is our report here. Let's press OK. As we can see here, this is the different which I mentioned in the pre-process. If we reloaded the report again, here it's trying to process the data first and just to fill the temp table and then extract the design as we can see here. And it didn't take a long time because we used insert record set.